welcome to episode one. Who is the silent buyer and why are they running the show now? So, we've all heard that 70% of the B2B buyer journey happens before a sales conversation even starts. But what does that actually look like today, Chris?
Yeah, well, I think, the traditional funnel that was a construct of the marketing automation vendors of days gone by, your Marketos and Eloqua, of this beautiful linear leads coming at the top of the funnel and they work their way through out the other ends. Yeah, I think we all know that maybe that was never true, certainly not true today. And actually, the reality is in B2B, unless you're selling a simple product-led single buyer, trial pay on your credit card. For the rest of us, if you're selling to mid-market enterprise or complex products or services, there are lots of buyers involved. They all require more touch points than arguably ever before. They're, as you alluded to, they're all doing more and more of their research, often anonymously, silently, as we've said, before they're willing to speak to vendors. And even by the time they are ready to speak to a vendor, if you're not on that short list, you're probably not getting a look in. So it's a much more complex world we're operating in now. There's more buyers than ever before involved. There's some great data out there right now of the number of buyers involved and how many of those that will ever actively engage with the vendor. If there's 10 buyers in a committee, maybe only 2 or 3 of them would ever fill in a form, give you their email address, but the other 7 or 8, they're important. They're on our websites. They're doing their research. They're involved in that decision-making process. So we're living in a complex world right now. And I say these silent buyers we know are influential and important in that process. But getting to them is another matter.
Yeah, and we see that at Trumpet. So, like our data is showing now, I think there's 3x the number of stakeholders involved in deals than there were previously. And as you say, you might actually never speak to some of them, which is crazy when you think like they could be some of the decision makers behind the scenes. So, what are these buyers actually doing before they reach out? Like, what channels, what content formats do you think they're engaging with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we know that buyers are looking for, I guess, more self-guided experiences. They're looking to do their own research, and that could be anywhere from sat at their laptops at work to on the train home on their phone to sat on the sofa watching Netflix, reading some content on LinkedIn. We know buyers are trying to build more of a picture themselves in that research stage around the different options that are available to them and really give themselves a really informed picture and an informed view of different vendors. And that can happen across lots of channels. The website, from our perspective in RealFlow, all of those roads ultimately often lead back to the website and that experience we give to our visitors who are on our websites. But yeah, obviously we know now there's a wide range of touch points that we've got to cater for in that sort of earlier stage of the go-to-market.
And one of our sort of big mantras is obviously buyer enablement. That's the phrase we push at Trumpet a lot. And one of the facets of buyer enablement is making it as easy for the buyer to buy as possible.
Yeah.
And within that phrase, if you cut it down a level, it's making it as easy as possible for the buyer to do the research as possible. So where like old forms of like gated content or, the put your email in and to get this PDF and you're then going to get blasted by an AE team.
Yeah.
Why do you think, those are sort of now finally missing the mark with this audience?
Well, as you alluded to, people are increasingly reluctant to give their email and contact details away because they know we've sort of created this flywheel of the moment you put your email address in, an SDR's probably putting you on their next list, the AE's picking up the phone, even though you may be miles away from ready for a conversation. So, I really think we've got to, as marketers, salespeople, we have to embrace the fact that give away the good stuff, got to give value to our buyers, help them educate themselves, get them as close, do everything you can to remove friction, I think, to get them to a place where they are ready to engage with you. And ideally, they're the one who's putting their hand up and they're ready. You've led them to that point when they're happy to now take on a conversation and they're the one who's sort of starting that conversation.
And have you seen any data or is there any like real flow information based on like seniority? So is there a case that it might be the senior ones that are doing the research but not booking a demo, putting their email address in and sending maybe a more junior person to go and do the demo and get the process started? Or is seniority, not the thing that we should be looking at in this case?
No, I do think seniority is important, particularly if you're, a higher contract value product or service, and the CMO or C-level person is ultimately the budget holder. Then, given we know they are pressed for time, they are probably going to have a look on your website at some point and be involved in that process. They may not be the one who fills in the form, as you said. They may not be turn up on the demos, but they're in the background, involved in that process. And you need to make sure that they've got a good impression, so that when the junior, the marketer, the manager is taking the proposal to them, they've already got that brand awareness. Maybe there's an element of trust there, some familiarity. And in the short window of time you might have had their attention, they've got the best possible impression of you as a vendor.
And we'll deep dive a bit more into this in the coming episodes, but how do you think, I guess for you, I can touch on sales, but you from a marketing sense, so how do you and RealFlow think marketing teams should now be sort of rethinking their approach if they want to reach this silent majority?
How long have we got? I think I'm a massive believer now, like we've got to almost break away from the traditional like funnel approach of like chucking leads in the top and obsess about lead capture and conversion and grabbing email addresses, and then can we put them through some nurture sequences and they'll pop out the end as like a live opportunity. I think if we move away from that and really think about, okay, can we ultimately be putting great content that's valuable out there, genuinely like interesting insights and experiences and things we can share that add value. If we've got a good product and we've got good customer stories that we can share, ultimately to give our customers, our buyers, a better experience when they do get to our website and they do have these touch points with us. All of these roads, I think, will sort of lead to ultimately a much more informed buyer with a better opinion, built some trust and familiarity, aware of the brand, even way before they're even considering they've got a problem we might be able to solve. So yeah, I think there's a whole like rethinking, a lot of the old playbooks that we adopted in my previous startup 10 years ago, they just don't work now. Like we're operating in a different era now. So I think we have got to go back to embracing giving away value, giving people a much better experience, as I said. And if you do the right things consistently over a period of time and not chase sort of silver bullets and these sort of growth hacks, you will ultimately, I think you'll win.
And go-to-market teams sort of nowadays. So my background is marketing, brand marketing actually, and now CMO's Trumpet. I've seen the shift from, let's call it sort of brand marketing towards very data-driven, MQLs, SQLs, funnels, as you were talking about. I personally, and it's something we've adopted at Trumpet, is gone back on actually the importance of brand, and you mentioned brand before. So like, how important do you think, like, just general positive feeling towards a brand and brand awareness without it necessarily having to have like a funnel behind it, it is important in sort of modern day marketing in B2B?
That definitely aligns with many of my conversations. In the last 6 months, I must have spoke to 200 plus B2B marketers, and there's definitely a sense of like a refocus back towards brands. Interestingly, like if I've been speaking to sort of more experienced, maybe more seasoned marketers, a lot of them echoing what you've said, like actually the pendulum's now swinging back towards brand and long term, as opposed to the sort of short term hacky demand gen style, numbers games. Don't get me wrong, there's things that are important there, but on the brand side, there's a lot of data now. If you're not one of the 3 or 4 vendors, I think 80% of B2B buyers have already chosen their sort of preferred vendors for a shortlist before they're willing to like get into deal cycles. So if you're not one of those 3 or 4 that they already know, they're aware of, there's an element of trust and familiarity there, then it's very hard to get on that shortlist. And so how do you do that? Well, it comes back to, as you alluded to, like power of the brand, the storytelling, the consistency, the giving value over a prolonged period of time, so that you've got some of that mind share when they do realize there's a problem they want to solve, or they're ready to take a look at a new solution.
Yeah, I totally agree. So yeah, that's the end of episode 1, where we've established like who this buyer is and what they're doing before they even maybe get to your website. Episode 2, we're going to dig a bit more into like how you turn this insight into qualified leads for your business.